think we can start. Um, so welcome to lesson 9 of Introduction to Web Development. Um, so this is the second to last lesson for this course. Um, so today we're going to be talking about JavaScript options and document object model, or DOM. Yeah, so and as always, this lesson is recorded and posted on the Alphademic YouTube channel if you want to watch it later. These slides are posted on the Google Classroom. So first, last lesson we learned some stuff. We learned some conditional statements, Boolean operators, if statements, and some loops. So remember, we can use the less than or equal to sign to compare different values and numbers. Basically, these Boolean operators return true or false based on whether or not the comparison is true or not. And then we can use these operators in if statements and loops to either do something like an if-then kind of thing, where if something is true, then it'll do something, or we can create loops, which will basically repeat the same code over and over again until we get to some point. We also learn how to create functions, which are just basically these blocks of code, which you can reuse them. You can like call it whenever you want. Yeah. So today we're going to be covering JavaScript objects and DOM. So if you remember back from 2 lessons ago, back in Introduction to JavaScript, we learned that a lot of programming languages separate things into different objects. So let's take a real life example, right? We can have hotels and cars. Those are 2 types of things. You can have different hotels and different cars, but they're all hotels or cars. And each object has unique properties or characteristics to it. So for example, hotels, right? They're all considered hotels, but they might have different number of rooms, different pricing for each room, if it has a pool or not. And these are all different properties of, let's say, a hotel object type. So that's the type. And obviously, different hotels have different values for these properties. So it might have different number of rooms, different pricing for each room, and that kind of stuff. And in the real world, like everything, like there's behaviors to everything. Stuff happens to real life things. For example, in hotels, somebody might book a room, or somebody might leave a room, and then that'll change something in the property. For example, if somebody books a room, then in a hotel, then there's one less room that's available to be booked, right? Or if I don't know, if the hotel loses power or something, maybe they have to close down, then no rooms are available. So these are different behaviors that we can represent using methods. And so this is back from lesson 7. We have this flow chart, right? We can create an object that represents a dog. And if a dog is a pet, then there's different properties that every pet dog has, right? You can each dog has a different name, different breed, height, weight, and these are properties that are unique to each dog. Although different dogs are still considered dogs. Dog is the object type, and the state or properties are what make the dog unique, or some traits that the dog has, right? And also dogs have behavior, right? In real life, dogs have to eat things, dogs walk around, dogs run around, dogs whatever. Um, and so those are what we call behavior. Uh, so we can represent the behavior in um, uh, coding, in programming languages with methods and functions like simulated here that represent something that happens to each object. Um, so in JavaScript and most other programming languages, there are built-in functions, and there's also the ability to write your own. So for example, the past few lessons, one built-in property that we've been, one built-in function that we've been using is a console.log. So that's built in. We can just access it in our code right there. And there's also built-in properties and objects. So for example, in this case, the object is the built-in object console. And then the method that we're using is log. So there's built-in functions and objects in JavaScript. You can also write your own objects in JavaScript. So, so like I said, an object is a type of thing in JavaScript that you can create your own, right? How do you create an object? How do you give it different properties? And how do you create different versions of this object, right? So in JavaScript, you can first the way I'm going to teach you when you're creating objects is first we're going to create what is known as a constructor function, which will basically be a layout for how the object is made. So it's like a template, right? The template, and this template has different parts to it, right? It might have different properties or different things that happens, and then after you've created a template, you can then create what are known as instances of that object type. And instances are basically different iterations or versions of that object. For example, if you create a hotel template, right? And so now you know how to build a hotel. Then you can actually build one. Let's say we create Marriott Inn or whatever. And then in our code, we can create it. And then we can assign it different properties. But it's all made according to this the template that we use it. And then you can create methods that work specifically for that object type and that do something for that, right? So if we open up REPL.it, I'm just gonna, go to REPL.it here. And so so if we open up our REPL.it here, I'm just gonna walk you guys through creating an object. And I'm just gonna be just copying the example that I posted on the slides. So first thing we have to do when we're creating an object is, first of all, we have to make a template for it, right? A template for how all instances of that object are going to be based off of. And so how do we do that? We have to create what is known as a constructor function. That's just a comment there. And basically a constructor function is basically just a normal function, except if you use, there's some keywords that you use that'll tell JavaScript that this is creating a template for an object type. So first of all, we use the function keyword, right? That's creating a function. Then the name of the function this time, since we're doing a constructor function, is going to be the name of the object type. So in this case, I'm going to do hotel. And so that's just a blank function, right? That does nothing. And it's just a normal function right now. And one thing, when you're creating a constructor function to construct objects, the name doesn't matter, but usually for objects, for constructor functions, we usually use an uppercase letter for the first letter, versus if we're just doing normal functions, like a function that's not a constructor function, we might just use a lowercase. But in this case, we're creating a an object constructor function, so we're going to be using an uppercase letter. And if you remember from last class, functions have parameters, right? Input, we can input stuff, right, into the function. So in this case, let's say when I create a hotel, I have to determine what its name is going to be, how many rooms it's going to have, and then maybe the number of rooms that are already booked in the hotel. So those are the parameters. When you create an instance of the hotel object type, you have to input these into the function call. And so given those inputs, we then create different properties for hotel, for the hotel object type, right? So remember, this is a template function for the hotel object type. So we have to make this template applicable to all instances of our purpose, which is creating a hotel object type. So how do we create properties? So in JavaScript, you can add properties by inside the constructor function using this keyword. So this keyword. And basically what this keyword says is that it's saying that whatever thing is connected to this keyword, that is going to be applying to an instance of that object. So you dot this keyword to a property name, right? So in this case, we're just going to create a property name called name, which is going to represent the hotel name. And then we have to assign that property. In our constructor, you can assign it to whatever value you want. In this case, I'm going to assign it to the value that was inputted through the parameter here. So what this is doing, like, this is kind of weird looking, right? There's two names, but what this is doing is it's saying, when we're using this keyword on the left side, it's saying that, okay, we're assigning something to a property, an instance property called name, which belongs to an instance of the hotel object type. So this is unique. Each hotel instance has a name property now. And if we call the constructor function at the bottom, it'll automatically assign whatever name we've inputted to the property called name. Now, these are variable names. This is a property name right here. Next, we want to create a property called number of rooms, right? So another this keyword, and I'll just call it rooms just because it'll represent the total number of rooms that are available. I'll assign it to rooms. And then also this dot booked, which is going to be representing the number of rooms that are booked. And I mean, you don't need to name it the same name as what the parameters are. You can say like this dot num booked or something, and then the property name will just be changed to num booked. And I'll just leave that there just because. So after we're done with this, we've basically, in our template function or constructor function, we've said that if this function is called here and we input the correct numbers, the correct values for the parameters, if this function is called, then an instance of the hotel object type will be created, and that instance of that object type will have three properties. It'll have the name property, the rooms property, and the num booked property. And in this case, we've already assigned a value to each of those properties, which is what we've inputted. And so if you're creating properties and you um, create the property name is a unique name that you haven't used before, like booked, right? That'll create a new property versus if you use the same name as a property name that you created before, then that'll just alter the value for whatever is assigned here. So if I did this.rooms minus minus, that will decrement whatever value is in here. But we're not going to do that yet. So then we have these properties, right? And I'll just label it using comment properties. You don't need to do that. I'm just doing it just to label it. Then we can have methods, right? Remember, methods will do something to change this each instance of this object. So in this case, I want to have two properties, right? One property I want is to find the number of available rooms, let's say. And so whenever we call this method function, it'll return us the number of available rooms that are not booked in each instance of this hotel. So in this case, usually we would create a function, right? Since we're doing a method for this object type, first thing, it's a little bit different. First thing, we're going to do this keyword and then a dot to make it connected to this keyword. And then we have the function name. I'll just call it num available. And that'll just tell us like how many rooms are available, right? So we've done that. Then we use an equal sign, and then we use the function keyword, parentheses, and here. So what this will do is it'll create a method that will work on all instances of the hotel object type. And this method is called num available. And it'll execute whatever code is in between these curly brackets. The purpose for creating this, I wanted to return the number of available rooms, right? And how do we find the number of available rooms? It's very simple, minus the total rooms minus the number of rooms booked. So we can just make a one-line statement. This.rooms minus this.num booked. Now, why do we use this statement here? Because in this method, we want to refer to this instance of the object. So you'll see it later when we call the method or the function. We'll have to dot it to the instance, the object name, and you'll see that later. But and this will just return us the number of available rooms. What if I wanted to create another function, right? Another method, right? That'll simulate somebody booking a room, right? We could do another method called this.bookRoom, and then it'll create a function, and then we could do something really simple, which will basically decrement the num, or increment the num booked, the num booked property, because when you book something, when you book a room, then the number of booked rooms increases by one, right? Yeah, so that's that. So at the end of this, we've created a constructor function which serves as a template for creating instances of the hotel object type. So to just repeat what we've gone through, here we have a function called a hotel, and we have the parameters that are inputted into the function. And then we assign properties, the different properties to this object type. So we have the name property, a number of rooms property, and a num booked property. And then after that, here, we have these methods that work on instances of this object type. Oh, and I forgot, you have to add a semicolon after these parentheses, curly brackets. So then how do you create an instance of the of this hotel object type, right? How do you create an instance? Well, okay, I'll just show you. So first, we're going to create a var, right? And then we can give it a name, or let's say cool in. And then how do we, so we've created a variable called cool in. We want to make this variable of type hotel. So basically, we want to, when we're using the constructor function, we're creating like a different variable type, which is an object. So how do we create a new instance of the hotel variable? First, we have to use the new keyword. That'll say, okay, we're creating a new instance of this object, right? And then we just call the function, right? And we'll, first parameter, we'll call it cool in. The second parameter, we'll give it 50 rooms. The third parameter, we'll give it 20 rooms booked. And just like that, we've just created an instance of the hotel object type. And we can create another one. Like we can create as many as we want. We can create, I'll just call this warm in, equals new hotel warm in. And this will have, let's say, 30 rooms and maybe 10 booked. And just like that, we've created 2 instances of the hotel object type. Okay, so a lot of people want me to post this code into the chat. I'll just do that. Yeah. Okay, it's posted. So now, how do you access the properties, or how do you use the methods, right? Well, first, let's cover how do you access the properties. Let's say you wanted to print out into the console the name of the, or the, yeah, let's say the name of the hotel, right? Console.log. How do you access? Well, let's say we wanted to print out the name of cool in, right? Well, since cool in is of type hotel, we have to, and name is one of its properties. We have to call the property of cool in, the name property of cool in. So how do we do this? First, we have the name of the instance. So in this case, it's cool in, and then we dot it to the property name. In this case, it's going to be cool in.name. And if you run it, it'll print out the name, which is cool in, which we've inputted here. And the same goes for all the other properties like rooms. If you printed that out, it's going to be 50. Right. So that's how you access the properties of an object. Now, how do you access the methods, right? What if somebody actually booked a room? So in this case, just to demonstrate the change, I'll just do coolin.numBooked. So originally numBooked is 20. After we call the bookRoom function, coolin.bookRoom, this just basically calls a function, the method here, and then afterwards it should do what this code does, which is it adds 1 to the num_booked property. So afterwards, the num_booked property, oops, should be changed. So in this case, did I spell something wrong? Hold on. Oh, wait, no. Oh, wait. I don't know what happened there. Why was it undefined? But yeah, so if you run it after you do that, you'll see that at first the num_booked property was what we set it to, right? We didn't change it. We just set it to 20. After we call the method, which increments the num_booked property of whatever instance, in this case, it's cool_in. Then afterwards, it should have been incremented, which it did, right? Or let's call the num_available method for the warm_in, right? Console.log. Sorry, let me plug in my charger. It's gonna die. Yeah, so okay, it's not lagging anymore. So let's call the num_available method for the warm_in, right? So this is a different instance of the hotel object type. So warm_in dot num_available. So remember, this time for this method, it actually returns something that we want to print out, right? So that's why this time, when we call the method, we call it directly inside the console.log because we want to print that out. Versus before, this method didn't actually return something that we wanted. So we just do that, and it actually does something in the property. So then we print out the property. So in this case, if we print out this, you'll see that the third thing that is printed out, which is the number of available rooms for warm_in, is 20, because we said that the number of available rooms is the number of total rooms subtract minus the number of booked rooms. So yeah, so that's just a basic constructor and for a hypothetical object type called hotel. So yeah, that's that. So next, we're gonna make a jump to another concept, which is separate from objects. And this will lead into what we talk about next class, which is the HTML DOM, or document object model. So what the DOM is basically when you when a web browser reads through an HTML file or some file that is for web development, right? And it creates a web page. Oh, you want me to post the code in the chat? Okay, I'll do that. So yeah, so basically the document object model is the hierarchy, a hierarchy of all the objects in an HTML web page. So when a web page is created, or when it's displayed in a web browser, first thing, the web browser creates a document object, which just which represents the entire web page document. Then we have another object called HTML, right? That's the root element, so that surrounds everything in the HTML file. Then we go to these, it forks, and we have different elements forking everywhere, different elements enclosed within each other, right? For example, we have the body element, and inside the body element, we can have different elements like H1, A, or P elements. And then each of those elements in turn display another object. They show another object, which is, for example, in this case, the text object, or maybe a image object. And then also these element objects may have attributes. Remember, we talked about attributes. In this case, for the anchor element, which is a link element, we have the href attribute, which represents an object which basically stores the link for the anchor. And then usually there's another text object that stores what the actual link text is. So it's basically, the DOM just represents the all the things in an HTML file. And so with JavaScript, we can restructure an entire HTML document through editing each of these little boxes here, through editing each of these objects. And remember, each of these boxes is an object in JavaScript, so we can edit them. And by editing them, we can change things or make the website do things. The DOM itself is made up of nodes. So what is a node? A node is basically just an object which represents one of those little boxes from the tree we saw before, right? So there's actually 12 different types of nodes. The main ones that usually we see is the element node, which represents each element in the HTML web page. So in this case, HTML, head, body, P, anchor, H1, whatever. Those are all element nodes. So that the element node represents the type of element that is in the HTML page. Then usually the element node inside of it will either have another element layered inside of it, right? We could have different, like, for example, we have different P elements inside of a div element, right? We could have other elements, or we could just have another, what the content is, or in the case of P, the content is a text, right? So that's a text node. So you could think of it as like, for example, the uppermost node, that's an object which stores the next layer of nodes, which is in turn an object which stores the next bottom node, which keeps on going down until it reaches the bottom, which usually is just the content that's stored in between those elements. And also, some elements will have attributes, right? Like the anchor element or the IMG element. And so there's also a separate attribute node, which stores the attribute type of that attribute. And also, usually after that, there's another text node, which stores like the content of the attribute value in that case. So that's those are the nodes of the DOM. We also have a universal node, which is created upon, it's created when the web browser reads through the file. So the universal node or the default node is the document node, which is at the top of each DOM tree. That's the first thing that's created. That's basically represents the empty document. So it's created even if there's no content inside of the web page, but it's always created for HTML files. And because each node is an object, right, there's certain things that we can do that are built in, right? For example, there's certain methods that you can use with element nodes to change whatever element it is, or to delete that element or whatever from JavaScript. So we can use that to control and edit the HTML page. So that's the DOM. And I think that's the end of today's lesson. Yeah. Okay, so basically just a short review. We've covered objects, how to create objects, and also a theoretical concept, which is the DOM. So that's all we're going to cover today. Today was a really short lesson, actually, because I just wanted to cover these base things before next lesson, which is the last lesson, in which we'll cover a lot of things. Next lesson, they should be covered. In my opinion, I think they should be covered like together. And next lesson, we'll actually learn how to implement JavaScript into our websites. So yeah, that's all for today. I posted the homework, and also I apologize, last week I forgot to post the homework into the classroom. So this time I post, it was part of this time's homework, which I already posted. And if you have any questions with that homework, like email me or something, because it might be a little bit hard. I don't really know if it's going to be easy or hard for you guys. But yeah. Yeah, that's all for today. If you have no questions, if you don't have any questions, you can, you're feel free to leave. Or if you have any questions, you can ask them in the chat. Okay, so Claire, okay, so yes, this lesson is recorded and posted on the Alphademic YouTube channel. I don't know what the link for the recording will be because it hasn't been posted yet, but if you just go onto YouTube, and I'll just send you the link for Alphademic Learning, right? This is the link to their YouTube channel. You'll probably find my video somewhere. I just posted a link to the YouTube channel on here. And so, yeah, so the lesson recording will be posted on there. And my email is Daniel Zeng at alphademic.org. If you need to email me. Oh, if you need the Google Classroom class code, I guess I'll post it, but like this is the second to last lesson, so I'm not really sure. Yeah, but